Hey, Chris, thanks for being on the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be a part.
So I'm really excited for you to tell your story, and you're in a very interesting industry. I was just reading through your bio and talking about being in the staffing agency, helping American companies hire refugees who have been legally resettled in the United States. I mean, that's a hotbed topic for sure in general. Just anytime you use the word refugees or resettling or any of that kind of stuff, it stirs up all kind of different emotions for people, especially I think in our current political climate. So I'd love to hear like why or how you got into that world in the first place, and kind of what you're doing in that space.
Yeah, we have jumped right into the middle of the political rhetoric. So it's been an exciting ride. We started a little over 5 years ago. So at the time, there was very little awareness with our client base of manufacturing and construction and hospitality companies of what a refugee was, and so there's a lot of education back then. Now there is a very polarizing views on exactly what a refugee is, and people have opinions on whether they should or should not be here and how our country should be responding. And so we just say, hey, regardless of where you stand politically on the issue, the fact is there's 7 million open jobs in the U.S. and there's plenty of jobs for Americans who want them, and plenty of jobs left over that could be filled by those who are already here, who are legal to work and want to provide for their family, pay taxes, and instead of living off of our taxes that we're paying. So, 5 years ago, I was in a business community where a lot of companies were struggling to find good talent and dependable employees. And my wife and I had moved into the refugee community right outside of Atlanta, Georgia, called Clarkston. It's the most diverse square mile in the country.
Hmm.
And, as we got to know our neighbors, a lot of them would say that they needed jobs, and so maybe similar to many of the listeners, I just felt like, how hard could this be? We've got an ample amount of people who need jobs. There's an ample amount of companies who are trying to hire. So let's start a staffing company. And we had no prior experience at all. And many days I feel like I still have very little experience, but we're trying to figure it out and fail forward and make the biggest impact we can.
So I love that idea of failing forward. There's no question that anybody who has started a business has already had plenty of opportunities to fail. And usually one of two things happens. Either people fail and then quit, or they fail and go, okay, how do I not do that again and keep moving? And the reality is that most businesses fail in the first year. And then I don't mean just fail like they have a mistake and they keep moving, that they fail and don't continue operating. And so when you're able to make it past that first year, your chances of surviving are much higher. When you make it past 5 years, much higher, and 10 years, much higher beyond that. So what are some of the things that you learned? I mean, just as you started off, you're starting off this new thing. You say, hey, I'm going to start a recruiting business and I've never done this before. You're taking some risks there. So what were some of the biggest kind of hurdles that you had to jump over at the beginning?
Yeah, great question. We have plenty of failure to go around over here. So lots of good stories to tell. But I think for me early on, there was really just a point of saying the concept of what we're trying to do here, helping great companies hire dependable employees from the refugee workforce. It felt like the potential impact was so big that I would regret not giving it a shot. I would regret.
Yeah.
I think there's something in that for anybody who's thinking about starting a business, that there's a point at which you say, the potential here is so great that I can't not try. And if I fail, I fail, but at least I went out guns a-blazing. I mean, that's more of my personality anyway. And so, yeah, I mean, we jumped in with both feet. We being my wife and I mean, obviously she's a huge part of this process as well. And I was still working a full-time job and started this on the side. And for about a year and a half, really tried to make headway. And of course, there are a lot of companies that were willing to hire and very interested in what I was trying to do. But the business model we had at the time, we weren't officially set up as a staffing company. I was just trying to get people to pay me for matching them to a potential employee. And, for entry-level roles, that's just not a common precedent for that kind of function. And so, for a year and a half, I've helped about 80 people get a job, and I didn't earn a dime, not one. And so there was a point at which I said, all right, we're done. Like a year and a half. I mean, you just said it, like the numbers are against us anyway. Let's shut everything down. Maybe this is meant to be a nonprofit, but as a for-profit business, we're not set up in the right way to really be able to meet the demands that our customers have. And so we shut everything down and walked away.
So you could have, operated as a nonprofit to begin with versus a for-profit, because I think it would work out that way. So did you ever think about that? Did you ever kind of have to make that decision?
Yeah, we struggled with that a little bit early on, but we got to the point where we said there's some incredible nonprofit work that's happening out there, but we felt like for us to really be taken seriously, to be able to walk into any company and have the respect of putting a contract on the table and say, here's the value of our services. Not only is there respect in that relationship, but also in the fact that we're now placing people at your company, and we want them to be treated with respect. There is a value in that relationship as well. And so the nonprofit model did not feel like it would give us that leverage point. We work closely with a ton of nonprofits to be able to do what we do, and they're very, very critical partners in our work. But for us, we look at it as our goal is not to help as many refugees get jobs as possible. We want to help great companies hire refugees, and so that means our customer is the clients that we serve. And there's a very short feedback loop, right? Like if we do a good job, they're going to continue to come back and we'll work together for a long time. But if we're not placing the right people, it's not going to work out. And so we get the benefit of knowing that we can continue these relationships with companies from the for-profit perspective.
So one of the things I think is really important about most companies is determining what their why is. Like, why are we doing what we're doing? I think when people don't have a strong grasp on that, they often just fall off the rails eventually. And for you, it sounds like that why, at least originally, was those neighbors around you. They're human beings with a face and a name who who are going, hey, we need some help. We're trying to figure this thing out. And you're going, I think I could help these people. And naturally, that's kind of like how a lot of business starts, is I got a product or service that I think I could help somebody with. But in your case, it didn't sound like you really had any experience in that world. You just thought, I think I can figure it out. Is that kind of the case?
Yeah, I think it was two different problems, right? It's that wanting to help the people, the neighbors that lived around me. But at the same time, there's a very huge economic need for our country. And then for the individual companies that I was connected to, which was we can't fill the open jobs we have.
Right.
We get these calls and emails weekly with companies lamenting the challenges they're having. I mean, just yesterday, a company, a laundry company that's expanding around the country, and they said, hey, we've got an entire HR team, and they will connect with 100 potential employees for us. They might get a call from 10 of them and get on the phone with 10 of them, and maybe one or two of those will show up on the first day, but they definitely won't make it through an entire week. Mm-hmm. I mean, those numbers are, that's dark. And that's the common story right now for so many companies because the labor market is so tight. So, I mean, we see the tighter the labor market gets, the better opportunities we have. In Q1 of this year, we had 500 people walk into our office looking for a job for the first time. We say we're the only staffing company in the country that has more people than we have open jobs. So we enjoy that position, at least for now.
So I know you've had kind of a diversified career. You have a master's degree in business stewardship. You were a general manager at a large Chick-fil-A, and you even wrote a devotional Bible on business, a 31-day faith and work devotional that's read by a lot of people. Tell me the motivation behind writing that and how that kind of came about and how that is kind of part of your story.
Yeah. My faith is really one of the critical kind of pieces that's kind of driven me into business, which is not a common approach. And so for me, I felt like that I kind of wanted to live my life and kind of order my life by Scripture, by the Bible, and And so that kind of led me to considering going into some sort of full-time ministry
Mm.
position. And for me, the more that I read the Bible and the more I studied it, the more I realized there's a lot in there about work and
Mm-hmm.
the work that we do on a daily basis, business, stewardship, how we manage resources. And if I want to have an impact on the world, there's something to be said for doing that in terms of a ministry where most of the people you interact with probably feel and believe the same things you believe. But for me, it was more like I want to be around people who just are there's brokenness either in they're not able to find the right employees or they're having trouble putting food on the table, and just leverage my beliefs to have an impact on the world. And so that's kind of what led me into business. And so I felt like a lot of people that I knew would see business as kind of it's not a very holy pursuit, or it's not something you pursue out of faith. And so that
Mm-hmm.
led me to say, hey, there's lots of practical examples of companies that are doing good business that are rooted in, they might not be Christian companies, but they're building their business on biblical values. And I just wanted to share some of those stories. So that's what the devotional is about. And that's kind of the heartbeat behind the original desire to just make a better impact in the world.
Yeah, it's really interesting because I have had like similar motivations around like, should I be in ministry, faith wise? And I don't talk about this a whole lot on the podcast, but it's kind of related to what we're talking about is that there was a season for me where I had the opportunity to preach actually at our church for a while. And so there were a couple of years where I preached, I don't know, 6 or 7, 8 times a year at the most. And there was a season where I was kind of like, well, maybe this is what I'm supposed to do. Maybe I'm supposed to quit my job. But business is all I've ever done. I mean, I started the business I run now when I was, 17 years old. And I met with a friend who runs another business and also occasionally preaches at a church. And he said, why can't you do both? Like, there's nothing like your business is a ministry. And I was like, what? No, business is not a ministry. We just make websites and help people grow their business and make more money. And
Right.
and he's like, yeah, but you're engaged with people every single day who you have the opportunity to share your faith with, or at least be an example around. And it was like, oh yeah, that's a real thing. And then as you explore that in scripture, as you said, like there's a lot of fruit to that. There's a lot of people who had big influence in the Bible who were not in full-time ministry. I just think that's a really interesting perspective.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. I think one thing is certain when you're working with multiple cultures or in a cross-cultural setting, like we are, multiple languages being spoken in our office every day. Faith is such a huge part of conversation. And, obviously in business, you have to be very careful. But it's not anybody trying to push their faith on someone else. But I mean, we have really rich conversations around, faith and people's beliefs. I mean, it's just a central part of many people's lives, but certainly those who are coming from other countries and they're experiencing our own cultural and faith components of what life is like in the U.S. So obviously right now Ramadan is in full swing, and we have, many employees who are practicing Muslim, and this is a really important season in their life. And so determining how we can best support them and how we can help other companies best support them in this season is part of the business that we're in.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a interesting and diverse world that we live in, and you're definitely right in the thick of it, which is awesome. I mean, it's really neat that you're able to have that kind of impact in a community and area that needs people that are kind of come alongside them and help them. And like you said, your job also is really to help the companies find the people that they need, which ultimately benefits the entire economy. Because for all of us who are out there who are going to any type of business, like they need people to run all kind of jobs, and sometimes it's hard to find people to do certain kinds of jobs, even when the unemployment rate is what it is right now. So that's pretty neat. When you think about your business over time, what are some of the big achievements or accomplishments that you feel like you're the most proud of?
Oh man, what a great question. Yeah, I mean, I think there's a few things that come to mind. So, one of the things that we get to talk a lot about recently, we became a B Corp, and we're certified as a B Corp, and the first and only staffing company to do that. And so, I mean, the reason why I bring that up is, I think we just want to be a part of helping raise the standard for staffing companies overall. It's an industry that has a pretty poor reputation in how they treat
Hmm.
people. And there's really, especially when the labor market's so tight, there's just no reason for that. I mean, let's put people over profit and care for them in such a way in which everyone can thrive and flourish and move forward. So, we hope that we get to see and be a part of a movement of staffing companies that really strive to improve their standards in the way they relate and communicate to their employees. So that's something that we talk a lot about. Our big goal is to be in 25 markets by 2025. And so we're pushing towards that. We're in 4 now. We've got 3 others that we're rolling out this year and starting to push towards that goal. And so if we have a conversation again in a few years, I hope that, that's something we can be proud of. But if we do that, we'll put 30,000 refugees into full-time employment in the U.S.
Wow.
And that starts to feel like we're hitting we're moving the needle. We're hitting a percentage that, truly these individuals are a workforce that's benefiting the American economy, that, they are contributing in a meaningful way. So we've got our first book called The Refugee Workforce that will be published in the fall. And we're just talking about the economic impact of refugees in the U.S. and staying away from the politics, but just clearly stating the stats and the stories that are making a difference in our country right now. And I hope that is something that can help people have a slightly different perspective on capitalism and the ways that, immigrants and refugees can play a role.
So as you have grown over time, how has your role changed? Inevitably we all start out where we're kind of wearing all of the hats and doing all of the things because we have to. And then over time we start to figure out where to hand things off and how to adjust and what our strengths are best suited for. So what are your best strengths and where are you kind of most focused on as far as day-to-day operations go?
Yeah, it's certainly been a journey. So the first couple years, really by myself for the most part, and kind of doing everything and figuring out the systems. And I shared earlier, first year and a half, we basically shut everything down and walked away.
Hmm.
And through a series of really miraculous events, we kind of rose from the ashes and really kind of were able to pivot towards this staffing model and be able to cover workers' comp and manage payroll. So, so I learned how to do those things along the way, but really have tried to have a good focus from day one of what only can I do, and really being
Right.
focused on only those things and try to delegate well and really empower. I'm definitely not a micromanager by any means. So just allowing people to step in and make mistakes and learn from those mistakes and move forward. And so we have an incredibly diverse office staff that are very talented, but these are individuals that they're not going to necessarily be given the best opportunities
Hmm.
as they've been resettled here. But Sana, who runs all of our payroll, is from Afghanistan. He fought alongside U.S. troops in Afghanistan, and
Wow.
and then as he was resettled here, he's when someone looks at him, they might say, "Oh, is this guy a terrorist?"
Hmm.
Does he and his family need charity? No, he's an incredibly diligent, hardworking,
Hmm.
disciplined person who's managing payroll for over 200 people each week. So I'm grateful for the team that we have, and they have a growth mindset. They want to keep growing, so it just allows me to continue to give stuff away and try to be focused on the things that are most critical for me. So I just hit on 3 things. Say, am I casting the right vision? Do we have the right people on the team? And am I keeping cash in the bank? And try to focus on those 3 things and spend my time on those 3 things
Hmm.
and try to find people who are much smarter than me to handle everything else.
It's crazy. I was just thinking about the reality of just America and how much blessing we and fortune we have, just the fact that we kind of drew the lottery card that we got born here, at least I did. And the many people that did not, when they come here and have the opportunities that they have, I think the sad thing is that there are so many Americans that are a little bit scared of people just because they're different. They look different, they sound different, they eat different food, whatever.
Mhm.
And at the same time, like, they're just real people. I heard a great interview the other day with Tony Robbins, and gosh, I can't remember the pastor's name, but he's a pastor of a big church out in San Diego. And apparently it's one of the most diverse churches. 97% of all churches are either like all black, all white, all Latino. Like, churches, unfortunately, are not very diverse in America. And yet this church is very diverse. And he said, one of the big problems is that a lot of times it's like, what they think, or it's all about them versus like us being just humanity. And
Yeah.
he suggested in this podcast, he's like, what people need to do is go find a place to put yourself in a scenario where you are the ultimate minority.
Yeah.
And interestingly, that very same day, I had an opportunity to go speak at an event that was all women. And so, like, when you're the one guy in a room of all women, like, you're like, oh, here's the minority situation. But even greater than that, my wife and I had an opportunity to do a lot of missions work down in Haiti. And first time I went down there, it was a very, very small group. It was me and two other people. When we got off the airplane, you walk out of the terminal, and you look around, we were the only three people that were not like pure Haitian. Like, we were white as can be, all pretty tall, and everybody else is like roughly the same height, exactly the same skin color, exactly the same haircut.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh my gosh. And everybody's looking at you. But then when you think about that reality in reverse, how many times so many of these other people, somebody from Afghanistan walks into a, supermarket, and that's how they feel every day. And I think that, gosh, there's been so many times where I've had just little opportunities to just look at another human being in the face and be like, that is a person. And I'm not going to get too much into politics. It's not a political show, and I'm not trying to ruffle people's feathers. But what I am saying is that in business and in all places, like, the opportunity to find yourself in a place where you can just come face to face with another human being. I think we all have so much more in common, and yet we all want to pick these handful of things that we vehemently disagree on, and that there are no there's some things there's just no middle ground on, and we want to fight over those things. I'm like, man, let's just pick the things that we really agree on, and let's sit around the table and talk about it, and get off of social media and stop talking about it. That's a whole other separate tirade, but
Yeah.
you just make me think about all that, just having the opportunity to employ those kind of people.
Yeah, I'm standing on the soapbox with you. It's something that it's easy to engage in media and news, and all that stuff is really good, but it's easy to kind of have this issue at a distance instead of being able to meet someone
Yeah.
and learn their story, learn their name. I mean, that changes everything about how you relate to that issue. It's not an issue anymore. It's very personal.
Right.
And I think it's paramount for us, certainly as Americans, when it comes to the whole immigration issue, to do that. Get to
Yeah.
face to face with someone, hear their story, and allow that to at least inform where you stand, regardless of where you end up. At least you've had some interactions there that can, give you a sense of what things are like, outside of just the coverage that we see.
Yeah, and now I'm going to say something really political because I'm in the mood to say it. Is that at some point, I think in America, Christians have to decide whether they're Christians first or Americans first,
Mm.
and that's a tough question. It shouldn't be a tough question, but it is a tough question, at least with regards to how we actually act, how we actually behave. Because if we really believe that every human being was made in the image of God, we got some tough questions to answer. And that doesn't mean that the country itself should not have policies in place to protect its borders and protect the country and protect its sovereignty. I believe biblically that God gave, governments that power to protect people. There's no question about it, and defend against evil. But at the end of the day, there are some tough questions to answer in there. So hats off to you for, being involved in an arena that is, more controversial than building websites or running people's marketing, which is what I do. All right, we're a little off track because I'm down the road of politics and religion, which you're not supposed to talk about, but they're my favorite thing to talk about anyway. Let's switch gears a little bit and talk about work-life balance. It means something different to everybody. And for many entrepreneurs, they don't really hate what they do. They love to work, so they'll work all the time, sometimes at the neglect of their own health or their own family or their own friends or whatever else. So
Guilty.
first, what does work-life balance even mean to you? And second, how has that changed through different seasons of your life and different seasons of your business?
Yeah, it's something we talk a lot about here because we've got kind of the double whammy of, doing something that's good for people, trying to help people. So you just
Mm-hmm.
kind of feel this drive to continually to do it and never stop. And then on top of that, in staffing, it's an industry in which, in many cases, if you don't set it up correctly, you can be very much on demand for whatever the client needs, and you just feel like you're constantly having to jump whenever they say
Yeah.
jump. And there's a lot of people that can relate to that in other industries. So we kind of find ourselves at this perfect crossroads of being 24/7 in demand, and there's always something that can be done. And so one of the values that we put in place early on is we said we wanted to create some tension between two different concepts. So one is consistency and one is constancy. And so for me, I feel like constancy is the norm. It's kind of what our society sort of preaches and says, hey, hustle nonstop. Don't take no for an answer. Just keep grinding and you'll achieve your wildest dreams.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just all about work, work, work. And there's really no balance. It's just full out, full sprint. But I think what we all recognize is if we were to do that, and if we're fully constant in our work, it's just going to lead to tons of broken relationships. And
Mm-hmm.
personally, you're going to be a shell of yourself, right? Like your friends and family, there's going to be brokenness there in how you relate to each other. Your personal health, mental health, I mean, all that stuff goes out the window in the reckless pursuit of whatever this goal might be. And so we just say, hey, we want to be consistent, not constant. And so that might mean having more rhythms and balance in our work, that we work really hard and we work efficiently. But when it's time to turn it off, we got to turn it off, because whatever we go and do once we kind of turn off the work mode is going to make us better and more rested and more
Yeah.
well-rounded when we come back to it at whatever time it is. So I think for me, my trigger point is like, I'll be physically present with my family, but mentally I'm thinking about work.
Mm-hmm.
And there's those moments where I just have these kind of trigger points built in and say, well, like I'm being constant instead of consistent, and I got to take a step back, and I got to model it well for my team so that they feel the freedom to do the same thing.
Yeah, I think that's really important. The whole modeling idea, especially when you're the one with CEO in your title, people are going to do what you do more likely than what you say sometimes. And at some point, you got to lead by doing, and by doing things in a certain way. And I want my team to go take rest. I want them to go spend time with their family. I want them to take days off and relax and rejuvenate, because I believe people work better in those environments. And I think sometimes they work better even if they have a little bit less time to get the job done, but they're more rested going into it. And but I struggle with the same thing. I mean, gosh, I wish there was an ultimate answer to this thing. I mean, I've got 5 kids, and I get in trouble a lot for being present but not being present, and present physically but not present mentally, I should say.
Right.
And it's a struggle, and I think it's one that I like to keep bringing up because I think it's worth fighting about and fighting for, to really ask those questions. Like, when you write down those priorities and you say, these are the most important people in my life, these most important things in my life, does your calendar and does your checkbook line up with what you're saying?
Yeah.
Those are great questions.
Yeah, one of the very practical things that we do for our team is we encourage, hey, work from home or take some time off. We don't really have like a time off policy or whatever. It's take what you need.
Mm-hmm.
But we ask people to designate it in one of two ways. Either when you put it on the calendar, either say that you are you're away from the office, but you're available, away and available. Just because it's reality of our world. I mean, emails on our phone, whatever, text messages. So like, hey, I'm away, I'm at a conference, or I'm with my kids at their end of year recital, whatever. But I'm available if I need to answer a text message or jump on the phone, I can. Whereas UA would be AU is I'm away and I'm unavailable. Like I'm completely off the grid. Do not expect for me to answer anything from you, because this is my time to completely unplug and recharge. And so we try to hold to those two standards and stipulate that. I think just in the modern marketplace, it's important to have those differences and clarity around that.
Yeah, I think that's really huge. What's always interesting to me is on these podcasts, there's always like 1 or 2 takeaways, regardless of who I'm talking to or what industry. And you go, oh, that's an interesting idea. And I've never kind of seen it placed that way, that whole AA or AU, away and available or away and unavailable. is really good, because one of the things I think a lot of people do that's a mistake in our lifestyle of constantly being connected is, we're on vacation, but we're really not, because we're checking our email and we're replying to text messages and we're like in the stuff. And I've had to get to the point now where I used to actually, when I would go on vacation, I'd remove my email from my phone completely. Now I actually, this week, because I just hired an executive assistant like 2 months ago, and I'm trying to get out of my inbox a little bit more. I've actually disabled my email on my phone altogether, so I can no longer email from my phone, which is requiring some adjusting, because I realized I'm totally addicted to it. But it's like, man, if I've got somebody who's supposed to be in charge of helping sort this out so that I can just focus on the priorities, I need to check my email at this time of the day and this time of the day, not all day long. Because I think, especially as a CEO or a leader of an organization, it's so easy to get caught up in that whirlwind of the day to day. And there's always going to be something to distract you. And I found that what was happening for me is my inbox was like an easy escape. It was an easy place to go get a little dopamine hit, basically, because I could delete a couple emails, forward a couple emails, and it feels good. It feels good to start cleaning that thing out for me. But it wasn't the best use of my time. So I think figuring that out is important. But I love that away and available, away and unavailable. So we're starting to run out of time, but I love at the end to kind of just get some parting advice from you. If you were thinking about talking to another entrepreneur who's just starting out a brand new business, maybe they've been in business a couple of years, or maybe they're at that point where you were when you were a year and a half in, going, all right, we're done. We can't do this anymore. And then you had the opportunity to kind of come back and bring it back to life. When you're in that place, what are the things that they should be thinking about? What are the things that helped you overcome it? Or just some general parting advice for others who may be building something from the beginning?
Yeah, it's a really good question. One of the things we used to talk about a lot, I think it applies. We talked about this concept of vectory equals victory. And so maybe some of us familiar with the vector principle, and just the idea, like if you know where you're trying to be, where you want to end up, what is that final kind of place of where you think, you want to be, and you really kind of set your course for that, then it's daily making the tiny little decisions that will get you to that place. So yeah, it's the whole concept of, how do you eat an elephant? It's one bite at a time, right? And even like in a couple of days, my son will turn 5 years old. I don't know how he got to be 5, but I guess we put some food in front of him and we kept him from, major harm and injury. And we did that every day. And that little sequential activity every day leads to this kid who's already eating us out of house and home. And I think there's something to just saying, hey, here's the best I can imagine. This is my vector. I'm going to move towards that. And over time, you stop and you look back and you're like, how do we get here? I don't know. But it was just a little movement every day. So I would say, what's that tiny little next step you can take that's going to have the most impact? Take it. And then ask that question, what's the next thing I can do that's going to have the most impact? And victory is victory. You wake up and you're much further along the road or than you ever expected to be.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice. That idea is so easy sometimes to get overwhelmed with the big thing that needs to be done. But if we can break that down and say, hey, what's just the next little thing that needs to be done to point me in the direction of where I'm going? Just absolutely love that. Yeah. Chris, thank you so much for being on the show today. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you and get to know a little bit about your story and kind of what you're doing out there for the world. If people want to find you online, where's the best place for them to do that at?
Yeah, the staffing, our staffing company website's ampliorecruiting.com. And then I mentioned the book will release in the fall. It's refugeeworkforce.com, and happy to engage through either one of those sites with anyone out there that's interested in hiring employees or just learning more about the refugee crisis and community here in the U.S. And man, thanks for letting me be involved here. Great questions, and I always appreciate the content that you bring forward.
Thanks, man. I'll link up those web addresses in the show notes so everybody can find them. And Chris, I really appreciate your time today.
Great. Thank you.
Hey, I hope this video has helped you with some tips and ideas to build a business that lasts. Make sure you subscribe to our channel so that you don't miss out on the next videos that we roll out. And more importantly, for some awesome free resources, head over to our website at buildingabusinessthatlasts.com. You can get a free copy of my book there where I tell you how I have built an agency that's grown year over year for the last 20 years in a row. So go grab that, buildingabusinessthatlasts.com, and make sure to subscribe to our channel. Thanks. We'll see you soon.